Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the June 15th meeting of the City of Long Island Planning Commission. Clerk, would you please call roll?
Chair Rossi?
Here.
Vice Chair Raymond? Here. Commissioner Nelson?
Here.
Commissioner Stanton?
Here.
Commissioner Thomas? Here. Commissioner Dagan?
Here.
Commissioner Sangeli Daniels? Here. Councilmember Risberger?
Here. Thank you. Okay, is there any correspondence?
None.
Okay, are there any petitioners here today to address the Planning Commission? I see Mr. and Mrs. Fisher in the back. Would you like to address the commission?
Yes, is this the time we're supposed to speak?
Yeah, by all means, please.
Oh, okay. My name is Lee Fisher, and our wife Joanne, and we are here to just sort of ask some questions. What we normally do, I live on Spruce Street, 72 Spruce, right across the street from I've lived there for quite a few years. People live in... Let's not go back there. But anyway, just want to ask a few questions, and Pastor, maybe you can answer some of these for me. How many members are going to be in the house for this coming year?
In the house?
Yeah, I mean actually seven. Okay. And who keeps track of the number of people that come and go? I mean, I know sometimes there's sleepovers that, guys are studying hard and don't get a chance to get,
The brothers do. Yeah. The house manager, Evan Colbert is our house manager. Our treasurer and our president are on the way. They're coming from Ward County and Bold County areas. But all the officers, president, vice president, all those guys live in the house. Same engineer.
I would just like, every year what we try to do in the neighborhood is get together. Remember we were on Mrs. Clean's porch? She served the service, lemonade, and all that kind of good stuff. Mrs. Clean is 100 years old, and we were all talking today about things that come up. I think the major problem is the music is quite loud. It's not that we don't like that kind of music, but what's that?
I don't like it either that much, but
It's okay. But what we like to do, and what we will do, is as a neighborhood, we get together, and when all the students know, everybody gets that. We have a meeting, look over all these things to make sure everything is good. And this year, if you look around the phone number, basically, it's good. We don't really complain. There is one thing that we have to remember, as the members, that they're not supposed to park in the driveway, because what happens, you go into Mrs. Clean's, and she had that repaired a few years ago.
Welcome back. We're just about to look into a petition and volunteer or something.
I don't really need them.
That's what I like to see. Okay, so looking at more petitioners, has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from May 15th? Does anybody have any questions, comments, or corrections? this year, do May 1st next year.
Yes.
Have you had a chance to review the application for the general project side? Have you had all the necessary requirements?
Their CC was fine. Do we have any proof of movement? Please have records. Well, no noise ordinance records.
Do you guys have any complaints from neighbors at all? Do any of the commissioners have questions? See, thank you.
Julie Diggs, graduate of senior council in December of 20, yeah, it was last December. Current employee at Ford Corporation.
Anyone's latest? So, I guess the first process we have to classify the action on the secret, right? Just like every other, item on the agenda, pretty much is going to be a type 2 action under secret, which refers to the use of a residential or commercial structure, or of a structure containing mixed residential or commercial uses. So it's basically the use of an existing residential or commercial property. Do I have a motion to classify this as a type 2 action under seeker?
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Diamond, do I have a second? Second. Seconded by Commissioner Thomas. Any further discussion? Hearing none, could you please call roll?
Chair Hopkins.
Yes.
Vice Chair Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
Commissioner Stanton.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Duncan.
Yes.
Commissioner Singley Daniels.
Yes.
Thank you. So for those of you who don't know, basically anytime the city commission or city officers make a judgment call, what's known as a discretionary decision, we have to review that decision under the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, basically to determine whether or not our decision or the project that we're reviewing will have a negative impact on the environment. And it's pretty obvious that this doesn't, so that's what we're doing.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
We probably were okay last year, right?
Yeah.
So we could just ask if there's any changes? We do that.
Yeah. I mean, any changes I can note, perhaps. And I know that the legislative committee is, considering the recommendations we made for more expedited review that we made last month. So thank you to the legislative committee.
So, point of information, any changes regarding the FICA fraternity house in specific, or are you saying for fraternity? Any environmental changes? We start with toxic waste.
I think they're wondering around.
Who's trying to do something?
We should all hide.
The other one's Steve.
Sure. I feel a little question for how many people are living in the house that's been involved? I believe 9. I'm not sure. The house in total was 10. Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions for Mr. Gibbs?
Should I stand here?
What's the reason that we take action on this?
They didn't have CC. And completed the required inspection.
We're waiting on the required inspection, so they hold over until this.
And were the other items on this list that you passed out stipulations, were they all met?
Yeah, so like the meeting with the fire and the police, we now do that as just part of our inspection process.
They don't have to do that.
Well, they technically do, but we've now facilitated it by bringing the fire and the police department to them individually. So instead of having a big meeting, we just bring the fire and police to the house with us, we meet with the officers, we'll do the
So
inspection.
rather than schedule something, you guys just all come at once, basically.
And we get like an individualized, this is their specific house, these are the specific problems they might have here, and we do it at each house. So like we kind of changed how we do some of the processes.
It's been done with all three of these?
Okay, any additional questions for Mr. Diggs? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the special use permit as presented? With the stipulations that are presented in front of us. Motion made by Commissioner Maskin, do I have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Thomas. Any further discussions? Okay, hearing none, clerk, could you please call roll?
Chair Robinson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Marina?
Yes.
Commissioner Master?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanton?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas? Yes. Commissioner Darling?
Yes.
Commissioner Summer Daniels? Yes.
Approved. Thank you, Mr. Days.
Enjoy the rest of it.
Okay, next on the agenda, the gentleman from Calcap Epsilon. If you guys, just a representative here, you can speak.
I am Brian Jones.
Okay, thank you. So, kind of the same deal, we're here to apply for a special use permit to occupy 61 Elms Fraternity House from June 1st to May 31st of next year. Do they have all of their required inspections?
Just like the other one.
Just like the other
Yes,
one.
and they're at their CSC yesterday.
And has there been any significant changes year to year?
No.
And do any of the commissioners have questions for Mr. Grimes?
Never really police actions, calls, or...
I mean, so we classify those under noise violations, and there have been no noise violations.
So they don't report on other instances?
So like if the police went to a house and there was no actual activity, no action taken, we don't have a record of that. So like the police might go to a property, but there's no,
If nothing happens.
right, nothing happens.
To answer your question, no, we haven't had any police interaction.
Right, so as far as we know it happened.
And we just went through this last month, right?
They told us that last month. We didn't have the official.
It seems that based on the application, you guys have maintained a quite active role of community service and everything.
Yeah, so we volunteer for the VSW every Friday, along with St. Jude, we volunteer with them.
Do any other commissioners have questions for Mr. Grimes?
I know we approved the site plan.
Gotta do this secret first.
Legal classification is hold to action.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Biden to classify this application as a type 2 action under secret. Do I have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Sandy. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, would you please call roll?
Chair Robinson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Marina?
Yes.
Commissioner Master? Commissioner Stanton?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas? Commissioner Darling?
Yes.
Commissioner Summer Daniels? Yes.
So now for the special use permit application, any other commissioners have questions regarding that?
I guess I've asked for this one also, how many members we have?
So we have 10 or 11 rooms filled, so 10 members of the room.
To approve the special use permit with the stipulations. So moved. Made by Commissioner Sandy Daniels, so second. Seconded by any further discussion? Hearing none. Clerk, would you please call roll?
Chair Robinson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Marina?
Yes.
Commissioner Master? Commissioner Stanton?
Yes.
Commissioner Summer Daniels?
Yes.
Okay. That's right. Sorry, thank you very much. Okay, that's the agenda. We have offices.
Good evening, thank you guys for taking time to meet with us tonight. I'm Kevin Colbert. I will be a senior on the 17th school start here. We had a so our financials are a little mixed up, so we wanted to do a couple of house repairs starting here that we would have normally done or like to do, but we figured it out. And from the last week of the school year to about now, we have had almost everything on the list taken care of. I presented them over 6 times with the lawn, painting his whole house, doing a bunch of things. utility defects. But besides that, everything on the inspection is done except the front porch, which we have planned to repaint and everything done. Just to piggyback on what I just said about, it's not really ownership. Our Alumni Corporation still owns the house, but our national fraternity, obviously the 5 days from Conway, Indiana, has the housing corporation. They manage 50 Alpha City houses around the country. We just recently had one of the brothers from National come and visit with us. They just manage the property for us. When the guys pay their rent, it's to that national corporation. Now, so they're overseeing all of the repairs. They're paying for repairs and upgrades to the house. Working with contractors to get a new roof on the house, hopefully this year, which we hope, with approval, will open up our third floor. The third floor to the house, which has 3 bedrooms, has not been allowed to be used for a number of years now because the stairway to it is compromised by the roof. You can't stand up straight in the stairway. So we're looking at one of the new house corporation is they're managing for us. So we still own the property. Taxes and property taxes.
So we've received copies of all those reports. Yeah, so those are in the office. But this house is not received CC. I mean, they can come over. This house is So John's in control over the course of this year. There have been problems in this particular house with their alarm system. It's been revealed by everyone, including that. We as a code office can contact Johnson Controls because they're the fire department in case any false alarms that it was becoming an issue with the fire department. I had a really hard time getting a technician from Johnson Controls. So part of the delay in getting switch and some of that stuff on that system is not been that. It's literally just been a technician in Johnson Controls.
How much time do they need to take to get the CC set and set up to that? We need to do that. That's something we should agree that out.
Yeah, so what do you mean, like 30 days?
Yeah, 30 days old.
That kind of makes sense,
All set for,
So what will happen when you're done with the violation report, just call the code office and get it, guys can come back and verify that the list is clear.
July 20th, July 20th, maybe, thank you. Yeah, what's the people for? Same place, same time.
Some of the sheriff, well, if the city pursued the, some, like the the state programs, like they could make that development more attractive too.
There's someone soon.
Oh, stop, this kid.
You can run up this house, it's funny when you're
Sounds good, I mean, inflation, and the interest rates.
Well, yeah, now if the interest rates are going to be raised by 0.75%, that's going to really squeeze a lot of development projects pretty hard. Yeah.
What interest rates are federal?
At the risk.
Actually, the last few months.
I would assume that would include how the tax credits are paid out.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's gonna, because it's probably likely to affect those options, yeah.
One question, did all the recommendations, did they get passed along from the last one? That's why I'm checking.
Yeah, the minutes that have the recommendations from the planning commission.
To the legislature.
The more you just encourage me to read the minutes, if you guys.
Yeah, which recommendation are we talking about? I don't have the minutes. You want the minutes?
Yes, you do.
Are we talking about this for the implementation?
There were a couple in there. Should be the second page.
There was one that had to do with minor subdivision, the lot splits. There's one also that had to do with fraternity.
We discussed the fraternity one, that was one day.
And then there's one of Okay, do we have more details on what the motion is here?
Well, we can discuss now.
Okay, so,
Unless you want to know more detail, we probably don't use the.
No, my have is what's in the minutes, but, I mean, the main things, kind of the overarching theme is that there are several types of review, I think for garages, like, simple demo, I guess, with construction in your garages, lower demos in kind, we thought would be best achieved through, Steve's office, kind of similar line of reasoning, simple lot splits. We thought that those would be more expedient through administrative review since the impact on the city is negligible, plus, the same, probably a higher level scrutiny is paid, in-house review than having them come. It would be hard to argue that there'd be more scrutiny. It would just result in a drawn out kind of process and more red tape for the average taxpayer to kind of go through. So we thought that those kind of simple applications would be best done by city staff so that they could move along and the planning commission could spend its time reviewing more substantive site plan applications and or discussing, planning issues in front of the city.
Also, the simple lot split is just, the current code doesn't really address it, even if it was to come to us, the current code, correct me if I'm wrong, really pertains more to larger subdivisions in terms of its requirements.
was this one related to that, parking lot?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what it started.
So it's one of those things where there's, a few gaps in the code that could benefit from being streamlined a little bit.
And like the garage demolition, for example, it's just, we just said demolition. So if they're building a garage, it's still probably to come to us, but, just the demolition is not going to be,
Yeah.
wasn't that
I mean, I would argue like,
No, I think they did put up a new one, but it was in the exact same spot.
yeah, I mean, if you're building a 10 by 15 garage, I mean, do we really?
I don't think it would, I think it's a little bit of overkill on that. I think that, if it's like a large historic carriage house.
I mean, that's where that discussion led to the third motion here, which is revisit the certified local government status, because we talked about historic properties.
Yeah.
And that sort of led us, I think we had previously asked to, recommended that the city join the certified local government program and action was never taken. So we're re-asking that, we're recommending.
Say that one again?
You can probably say it's.
Yeah, so Steve, several months ago, going to the previous mayoral administration, Steve had worked hard to get position the city money on to take part of Office of Historic Preservation Certified Local Government Program. I think my understanding is the program provides technical assistance to communities who, make concerted effort to preserve and protect their historic properties. The incentive to the homeowner is that they're, become eligible for historic preservation tax credits. There was talk at the time of a potential partnership with Otsego 2000. And, I should mention full disclosure that I'm, a member of their board, so, I can't vote or advocate for that, but, from a factual standpoint, that Otsego 2000 provides free technical assistance to homeowners looking to take advantage of the historic preservation tax credits. And they were also looking to partner with the city to potentially investigate expanding one of the city's 2 historic districts. Do I have that right, Steve?
Yeah, and that's actually underway.
That's underway right now. Okay, good. And then, so the Certified Local Government Program, that a lot of headway was made, and then it was presented to, I guess, mayor's office, and that's kind of where it ended up, and never made it to council.
Well, my question would be, why did it not make it to council?
I wasn't at the meeting, so I think, Steve could probably speak to that better than me.
Because I tried to talk to you about this on the phone, but I think you were talking about this, where I was talking about the group that was going out and reviewing the historic districts in the city. I don't think I got I didn't explain myself well. So this went to the previous mayor, but what was the reason that it didn't move from that office?
If you introduce mayor sets the agenda. So it never made it to the legislative agenda.
If you don't know why.
I mean, I can probably wage your ideas why, but no, it never made it to the agenda.
I mean, the reason I'm asking is I don't want to just automatically jump into this when I don't understand it, and we already have a pretty concern with it now.
The concern was having another layer of regulatory review is bad. Developers won't like it. We don't want to have any additional regulatory review.
So this is not just about preserving existing properties, then?
Well, it is, because it says you can't do things like tear them down or, take all the windows out and change the sizes to this big. And
The intent is to preserve and protect historic properties, but the program would require the city to develop, create a historic preservation and architectural review board, similar to that in Cooperstown, but, the administration would fall to whoever, the mayor appoints to that, commission. So, there are several other, cities throughout, municipalities throughout New York State that are certified local governments. Many of them have substantial development pressure. So, the kind of evidence has shown that, developers really aren't scared of that kind of layer of review. And in fact, SHPO review would be part of any other, redevelopment project in the city anyway, in the 2 historic districts. The other piece is that, in one of the 2 historic districts, or maybe both, right, is Walnut Street Avenue 1?
No, one wants not to.
Actually, yeah, so in one of the 2 historic districts, it's already covered by a pretty straight form-based code, which would basically achieve the same thing that this new board would be looking at.
So this would be different than what comes with being an official historic district.
Yeah, so the national district has no protection.
Yeah.
So you're free to tear down your house, you're free to paint it Pepto-Bismol pink and put,
You don't like Pepto-Bismol pink?
I just use that, I'm okay with it actually. Exactly, that's why I said Pepto-Bismol.
Here's a question I have for you then. How would this impact somebody that just decides that's got a 150-year-old home with a carriage house that they don't take care of, and it just just slowly deteriorates in the backyard, does this force that person to fix it?
Yeah, so like, that's one of the things that you're not permitted to do is demolition through neglect.
But how does it stop them through neglect?
We write tickets.
So then the other side is, you know,
It restricts what people can do to buildings. So like, if I were to, so like I had a porch on my house that was badly damaged and I'm slowly rebuilding. Well, I could have just like dropped 6x6s in the ground and built a deck. But an ordinance like this would say, no, you have to replace it in kind what's there.
One of the buildings, meet the code, the land approach is too low. And if there's damage, they put a 3-foot high railing across instead of a 2-foot. So they're going to do
So in a historic district, you don't have to comply with that. There's an existing building code that specifically states what.
we go with the historic.
Yeah, there's exceptions for that in the code.
So this would prevent, let's say, a landlord that has a railing that was destroyed over the course of a year, so they come back and just throw up a 2x4.
Yes, that's exactly what this is supposed to do.
so the other side, you know, then again, the incentive would be, you can say, you can call up, you know, folks at Secret 2000, and they can help you with the historical preservation tax credit, that you can get, you know, so either you do get some financial, I guess,
But obviously, it increases the cost.
correct?
It's going to increase maintenance costs for people.
Yep.
Because you're not going to be able to just use the cheapest, cheapest material you can grab.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And so I think the other thing that changed was that the Preservation League of New York recognized, you know, identified Oneonta's downtown as one of the 7 to save in the state. And so, I mean, I don't know how you know, how that came about, but, you know, there's at least some statewide attention on the cities.
That's about Steve fill out an application.
There you go. Yeah, we got that recognition, and I think that, you know, there's quite a bit of technical assistance in the links to help people out. It's not like they'll be left on an island to do that, you know, kind of working that thing.
One other question, let's say we did this. Let's take somebody, because I know there are many houses that have been built in the city in the last 20 years, but I know we got 1 or 2. What if you had a house that was built in the year 2000 in the city, and they wanted to do another project at the house? Is this going to make this significantly different and difficult for them?
Well, I mean, like, the only thing you might run into is like if it's in the National Register. So, here's the weird, so National Register districts get created, like Walmart is a National Register district. The National Park Service says, here's your plaque, here's your sign, burn it down, we don't care. There's nothing, there's no sort of regulatory function that protects those districts, unless there's like a federal project, like an interstate got blasted through there, something not like funding through the state, like grant funding, there's like shit overview. But a private individual, even in a historic district, can basically do whatever they want to do. So without localized protection, those historic districts, all they are is tax credits. So if you own a property in one of those historic districts, the National Register type, you're eligible for tax credits for repairs on those properties. So you get to write off, I think like right now the residential one's like 20% or 25%. The commercial ones are up to 50% of a qualifying project you can write off. You just get it back.
This is if you're in a historic district.
A national historic district. So other than tax credits, you get very little, there's no sort of stick. It's all just carrot. So you get all these tax credits, but there's no one saying, failure to maintain this building is naughty and you can do, so you can basically do whatever you want, which is why Disease ended up with like a sheet metal, modern ball looking, and there was nothing really that would say you couldn't do that. In downtown Leonte, you could still have done that until January 6th, when we put in the new zoning code. When that form-based code passed, we said you can't do that anymore. But until then, there was really nothing to say you couldn't do that. The way certified local governments work is they say, okay, there's a national register district, and then the local government says, we have this architectural review board, and they designate spots as historic districts. So what ends up happening is in a lot of communities that have these national register districts become local historic districts. And there's a review board that oversees how construction and like design is done in those neighborhoods. So let's say you had a new house that was in a historic district, there probably would be a board of review, whatever you were doing with it, to determine whether the changes you were making to that building would have a negative impact on surrounding properties.
And if you were building a brand new house, then that would definitely be reviewed. Right, because I think what happens in Cooperstown, if you want to build in Cooperstown, right, it's very difficult.
Yeah, so the National Park Service has a series of kind of guidance documents for alterations of, additions to. So what you would be looking at is like, it's not necessarily that you're trying to replicate what's there, you're just trying to not negatively impact what's there. So arguably, if it was me, and I was ruling the world and making all these decisions on my own, I would say like constructing something that's very modern next to something that's historic isn't necessarily bad, because you're not trying to replicate old stuff. You're not attempting to make like a false sense of history. So you would want new stuff to stand out or be separated from. So that's why like a lot of times if you see an addition on a historic building, if it's done correctly, it might look very modern because they're trying to differentiate between the historic and the not
So you will
historic.
see like a lot of the new breweries that are in a historic barn, that brewery additions like super modern, the architecture super modern, and the farmhouse itself is is historic, but there's like a distinction and they're connected.
Right. So National Park Service would argue like in their guidance documents that like you're not intending to create a false sense of. So some of this like stuff that these review boards end up doing in communities like is they try to make fake stuff. They try to like Disneyland it a little bit. We're not really looking to do that. And I think arguably historic preservation is not about building old stuff Disneylands.
Yeah, I mean, Cooperstown, will just really get on you about the type of shades you use or like the fence posts. I mean, I've been to those kind of, not that I don't want to go after the village, but I think that, it kind of comes down to, the intent versus the ability to administer. So part of the ability to administer, and you're fortunate to have a historic preservation expert, your code enforcement officer, plus, the commissioners, have to do training. They have to understand kind of the local environment, and they have to work iteratively with the applicants themselves. So any commission, even this one, theoretically, we could put every site plan applicant through like a really difficult ring, ask them tough questions and push them hard, or we could be thorough and work with them kind of as we have been, with, loss on deeds, for example, that one. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is that any, review commission, has the potential for abuse, that's recognized, but then the other piece is that, is the overall benefit to the community greater than that potential for abuse or misuse of the commission, and that will require, diligence from city staff and council.
Do you know what the planning commission can act as most appropriate?
So the National Park Service requires, so certified local governments are through SHPO, or National Park Service is the ultimate kind of, they're the ones that certify you. So SHPO says that you cannot have planning commission or ZBA as that reviewing body. The reviewing body has to be separate. It has to serve that function specifically. Because they don't want the zoning board or the planning commission to turn around and abuse their authority. And, the zoning board can say, we're gonna actually waive the requirement. So
But when someone else reviews it before, a different commission to review
they
it.
want a separate body.
Yeah, so if you're making an action in a historic district, would it then not have to come to us, historic, they can do it?
Fine. So the certified local government regulation is specifically not zoning. It does not regulate basically site plan review. It only regulates specific architectural elements.
Could they, but if they actually did require site plan review,
You might also both.
they couldn't act as the site plan review.
No.
So they were, they were good at both. And I think, if the commission was created, it would make sense for us to familiarize ourselves with standards that they would be looking at, essentially National Park Service guidance and others.
Now that I think about this more, it's like the new code we adopted is pretty well addresses historic properties in good detail. And I'm wondering if we can't just interpret that code ourselves as we do site plan review. Right, I mean,
They would be.
yeah, so, we have to go through too. Now, that's what I'm wondering, is now that we're on the same business, do we really need that second commission's review of something? If we have a code that's already pretty well addressing this, seems to pretty well address this.
Yeah, so in the certified local government program, the carrot to adopt it is that you are eligible for fund, but you're not typically eligible for fund.
So you get more money. I think the other piece that answers your question, so we've used to neglect and the only other projects that deteriorate the historic quality of our environment, that don't come under site plan review, that don't trigger us, all that could happen underneath. So imagine if it's like a bunch of stuff happening under the radar or under our, ability to review or control. So that's kind of where it would come in. In the event of major site plan application, I think what we did with the zoning board, essentially, we reviewed their variance criteria. We made a recommendation to them of what we thought, how we thought, the Hardwick solar project would fall under, the use variance criteria. And then they, took our recommendation or not. So that's kind of how it works. So we basically make it easy for the applicant. But that would require us to work with them. So that's kind of the ideal situation. So MD1 has all those historic preservation criteria. In fact, if it was under site plan, we'd be doing a secret review anyway. Secret has a pretty detailed section on historic preservation, impacts of cultural resources, etc. So we basically would be doing that kind of examination twice, the surrounding properties and the environment, and once on the actual property itself. So I think that we would be able to set up the table pretty effectively.
I mean, the reason that was all added to the zoning code was it became clear that the certified local government program wasn't going to go through, so I torpedoed that into the zoning code.
Yes, we understand, I'm just wondering.
It was put in there because it seemed like the CLD wasn't going to go through, so the easiest way to get it through was to bury it inside that code.
Something else to think about, as we're sitting here talking, I know a lot of the communities that have this.
Hopestone.
Pittsburgh, New York, Hopestone. Pittsburgh's had it for years, but it's a smaller community than,
Almost all the communities are outside. Schenectady, Albany, Binghamton, Cooperstown, Toledo, Amsterdam.
Has it kind of negative effect over the development?
Oh yeah, you can tell Saratoga is just down.
Amsterdam's getting a giant recreation center,
Yeah, and that's the problem. It's hard to let but it's at least a line in the sand to say, okay, we're not going to go any.
Exactly. I'll bring it to the legislative committee, Stephen, I'll probably meet you there.
Mr. Chair, I hate to keep you guys, but can we just talk about the last one? I have a little bit that we're in, which one was the fourth recommendation we did. We don't have to talk about it, just state it. Do you see the fourth one in there? What's the fourth one? So, new special use permit requirements for storage.
I actually do, sorry guys. Just because you were talking about Woodward Park, it made me think about like just my experiences there, and specifically with that in the basketball area. With signage, I think the signage is a little discriminatory, and the fact that there's no heat on the court, I just feel like it's a deterrent to have people actually play basketball there. So I'm not sure if this is the right
Are
thing.
you talking about in the corner of Wilbur Park? That was originally not supposed to be it was originally a tennis court. And it was changed to, they didn't want it to be an actual basketball court. It was supposed to be more of like a family gaming area. It had some basketball nets there. Because it's so close to the neighborhood there, and bringing a basketball court right there in somebody's backyard, they were afraid it was going to bring a lot of noise into that neighborhood, which it ended up doing anyway. So there's been issues where we had to put up, I think, some fencing or some barriers to try to drown out the noise, because the neighbors were complaining about just the noise till later in the night, when they didn't get that before. So I think what they're doing is they're looking to eventually move that and actually have another basketball court elsewhere in the park and change that back to the pickleball courts.
There was, that was the subject of quite a bit of debate, and I would say that some of the debate was coded and made me uncomfortable.
Yeah, I feel like the sign itself is littered with microaggressions, specifically towards black people.
I would tend to agree with that.
This aside.
Yeah, the sign says no inappropriate language and no music, just specifically in the basketball area. There's 2 tennis courts next to it that the sign isn't intended to regulate. And also 2 hours later, I went to call the police on me, which as a black woman, I was like, what? Which was interesting because when we were hours earlier, the OHS tennis team was playing their music through the speaker while we practiced in the other courts. And he came over to me while his neighbor was using the back shop. So I was like, oh, this feels like we just don't want me here. So I just thought maybe this would be a good forum for us to talk
Some
about.
of the debate during that discussion was kind of problematic.
I can imagine.
Well, I really need to say, I think that should probably, might be the place to go is actually Parks and Rec, again, or bring it to the full council.
Wasn't there a master planning document?
No, they
No, it's not actually,
I think that there's going to be the development of a master plan, and I think that would be a good, forum to have that discussion with the community in a more open setting, because usually those kind of planning meetings can happen during the evening, whereas the Parks and Rec committee meets during, work hours like 4:30 basically, which some people aren't off work, like I can't, go to that. I just happened to be at that one, because I had heard about it.
Parks and Rec, we talking about?
No, it was like a planning committee years, like a year ago.
Oh, yeah, there's some council committees that meet at 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, those, that is like a Parks Master Plan meeting, or public meeting, those will happen later at night usually.
Yeah.
In theory, and so that's what I'm saying, that would be a more open discussion as opposed to like, an actual business meeting or something. But even then, I think that if there are those signs, present in the community, and those should be addressed, particularly if there's a clear distinction between, tennis court and a basketball court.
Yeah. Very obvious to me, it was like tennis, a predominantly white sport. Even though someone wasn't going to be here.
No.
It's like tennis courts, like if you're going, you do parking right by the, you go off the parking lot by the one, you go to the left towards the pool, it's right there.
Part of the issue too is for years, this was a neglected, not neglected, but it was a tennis court that nobody really used, because what would happen is there was a lot of overgrowth on the perimeter of the park, which then caused sunlight not to hit the court, which caused things to grow on the court and made it slippery, so nobody ever used it for years and years and years. So I think that part of the issue is the neighborhood there got used to having, it's super quiet there all the time. And so that's part of what has driven what has gone on, because they cleared all that brush out too, to try to make the court usable, and then they changed the court over completely.
It seems like the signage though could just be removed.
Yeah, I think that's
Like a
pretty straightforward. I mean, I know it was.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a pretty weird sign to just put up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be a good recommendation. I mean,
Well, it's something to put there exactly for the issue that was going on.
Well, we have a recommendation to include the sidewalk.
I mean, I get it, I want to find it, but.
I recommendation that we take the sidewalk.
I have a motion made by Commissioner.
Wait a minute.
We can recommend that.
That's a recommendation. What is that?
Well, Mr.
I'm here for that, so.
Is there a
What's the
second?
actual motion?
Is to remove the sign on the lower basketball court. And replace it with language that, and consider replacing it. Yeah, to refer to the Parks and Rec committee to replace it.
I think
We'll do Parks and Rec, we'll not sign up.
So maybe we should have this thing in Parks and Rec's agenda.
Yeah.
Maybe move the schedule.
See, I know, would you be able to go to the Parks and Rec and discuss it with
I
them?
don't know the times.
First Monday of the month, that's
Because it would go through them, and even if they don't approve what you're asking, come to the full council and talk to the full council afterwards.
It seems awkward for us to recommend some of the council that we're saying Parks and Rec should review.
Yeah.
Well, she could come to Parks and Rec and discuss it then and bring it to the council because for further discussion, you know, more just to assist the liaison, which would be council. So just to, you know, be there as like a second witness to corroborate her understanding.
They'll meet July 18th because of the holiday. They meet July 18th at 7 o'clock.
It'll carry a lot of weight if you get the Parks and Rec behind what you're asking, and Councilman LaFleur Chu, then all of you will bring it to the council and have a discussion, and there's more likely that big change is going to happen, which I think that either we get rid of the sign completely, or that's the kind of sign that be posted everywhere in all parks. You take it in one little area.
It's either posted everywhere or not at all, basically.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm not in favor of it everywhere.
So allowing an amendment motion to put it on the Parks and Rec agenda. Would you be willing to?
Yes, amendment motion.
Okay, amended motion is on the floor, made by Commissioner Stanton. Second? Seconded by Commissioner Sangani Daniels. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, could you please call roll?
Chairman Atherton?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lehman?
Yes.
Commissioner Lanston?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanton?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner Sangani Daniels?
Yes.
Passed.
Any new business?